What's up, my fellow scruffy looking nerf herders, and welcome to the Carbonite Chat. Today we're going to be doing a little video on how Tarkin gained Vader's respect. Now this is going to be the first video of a series that I'm going to be doing starting now, leading all the way until episode 9. Yes, it's going to be a very long series. It's essentially running through everything that Star Wars has put out on canon material. This is the very first thing that we have right now as part of canon, and I'm going to follow it all the way, leading all the way to episode 9. Now this is about Tarkin when he was younger, and that's kind of the story that he begins to hear from Tarkin after the Emperor tells him that he needs to ask about some stuff from Tarkin that gives Darth Vader kind of the respect for him that the Emperor had beforehand. And this begins about 20 or so years before the Phantom Menace. Darth Vader's not the biggest fan of Tarkin for the simple reason of what he did to Ahsoka Tano in the Clone Wars, which, if you haven't seen that, she's being blamed for blowing up the Jedi Temple, and Wilhelm Tarkin is leading the investigation against her. Darth Vader, before Anakin Skywalker was the person who was training up Ahsoka Tano, didn't take this too kindly and still kind of has a distaste for Tarkin. The Emperor, knowing that this is the case and having very strong feelings for Wilhelm Tarkin, is trying to get Darth Vader to respect him and agree to work with him, as Wilhelm is, in the Emperor's mind, kind of one of the most important parts to the Empire. He sees him as one of the three of the Trinity on the dark side, with them two being both the top Sith, but Tarkin being the head of the entire military base, and which is why in A New Hope, when Tarkin says something to Vader, Vader obeys and moves on, because Wilhelm is actually above him when it comes to military things. Palpatine has great respect for Tarkin from after what he saw him going through and doing and accomplishing on the planet of Iriadu, where the Tarkins are from. Now, the Tarkins are very famous on that planet, as it was kind of out in the wild, and it wasn't really protected by the Republic, and it was a very dangerous area, and the Tarkins built up his forces that fought off and defended it, and by doing so they ended up gaining a lot of wealth and later getting into politics. And so after this happening, the Emperor tries to get him to move into politics. Tarkin, though, does not want to get into politics because he thinks it's kind of a weak side, but Palpatine, understanding that those from the Outer Rim, which Tarkin comes from, will never have the respect of those that are more in the center, who are viewed a little more highly than the rest of those, and he says politics the best route to take. But ultimately, Tarkin just uses the Emperor Palpatine to get him into the judicial organization. From that, the Emperor learns more and more about the Tarkin family and some of the stringent testing and kind of trials that they're put through to be able to be respected and kind of taken in as a man in the Tarkin family. This is where he begins to talk to Darth Vader, and he puts them on a mission together. This is all from the Tarkin Novel, which is an unbelievable novel, possibly one of my favorite novels, if not my favorite, in the top 3 between Lost Stars and Dark Disciple. But in this, he's sending Tarkin and Vader on a mission, trying to get them to work together, kind of see eye to eye and agree with each other, and at least have respect. And he tells Vader that you need to look into his past and talk to him, because he's gone through the same type of trials that you've gone through, and he's been tested as you've been tested. Of course, Vader being tested as a Sith, being tested as a Jedi, as a slave child on Tatooine. He doesn't believe that that's actually true, and ultimately it's kind of not the same, because Tarkin does come from a wealthy family. But the Emperor tells him to talk to him, find out what he's gone through, and you may be surprised and look to begin to have some respect. On one of these missions, they begin walking together to Tarkin's ship, and Darth Vader begins to ask him some questions. The first thing that he finds out is that during his time when he was a young child, Tarkin was first mentioned about this testing and trials that every Tarkin male goes through. He was a very young, I believe 11 years old at the time, when his father told him that at some point some people were going to come in and they were going to take him. They were going to take him to the wilderness, and he was going to be tested and had to survive. Tarkin asked, he goes, "Is it a chance I can die?" And he said, "Oh yes, there's a good chance. Many Tarkin men have died during this testing." And so to their surprise, though, Wilhelm takes this very well and sees it as a challenge to look forward to, and immediately runs upstairs, and he begins to put together a bag build shirts with extra pockets and cargo pants to prepare himself for what may come. That time finally comes when he's 13 years old. In the middle of the dinner, some men come in, one of them being his grand uncle Jova, and tell him it's time for his testing. They're all surprised as Tarkin just runs upstairs and gets the outfit that he's prepared and comes back downstairs ready to go through the trials. The first trials are on the Carrion Plateau, which is the only area of wilderness left that the Tarkins left there to be a testing ground for them, to make sure that there was never a time that, even though they were a more wealthy background and that they had the nicer amenities, that they never became weak, because that weakness was something that the Tarkins all viewed as something absolutely terrible and a way to end up losing everything that you owned. And so they constantly wanted to test themselves, so they left this area of wilderness there. So the first thing they did was go into the wilderness and begin to teach Wilhelm how to hunt, track, and find animals. As this begins to go on, he makes his first kill. He's taught how to eat and scrap for food, and he also experiences times of starvation and hunger where there is no food and it's very cold. His clothes that he made for himself quickly get tattered and are just basically destroyed. And he's then later taught, after they run out of weapons and stuff, how to then follow a predator, let them catch the prey, and how to steal the prey from the predator so that way they can eat. As Tarkin and Darth Vader are walking, they're heading to Tarkin's ship called the Carrion Spike. Darth Vader asks him, "Why did you name it the Carrion Spike?" Tarkin says the reason is because his ultimate test, the final test of Tarkin men, was they had to go to the middle of the Carrion Plateau where there was the Carrion Spike, where there's a structure of rocks that they had to climb up to, and the final test was climb all the way up to the top, spend the entire day up there, and come back down. Darth Vader says, as I'm sure most of you said right now, seems easy enough, so what's the catch? The catch is a species called vir-mox. Now these are very large, ape-like creatures that are so incredibly vicious, and they move together in packs and are some of the most dangerous creatures on the planet of Iriadu. And these are left there in the middle as a reminder. They were the only things that the Tarkins themselves did not ultimately get to submit to their dominance. And it's kind of out of respect they've allowed him to have this kind of center spear to control themselves. So that is the final testing, is that you've got to be able to survive getting up there and getting back down without them killing you, because it's a group of about 100 of them, and they are so incredibly territorial. And so the likelihood of you being attacked and killed on that is very high, as later on Tarkin mentions that there are many bones from many past Tarkins who failed this test up on the top of the spike. At the point of taking this test, he's about 16 years old, and his grand uncle Jova tells him that he's got as much time as he wants to be able to study and look around and figure out the best route to get up there. But once the decision is made, he's got to go up there, and there's no takebacks. Once he begins to head up there, he's got to do it, or ultimately he's going to die. So Tarkin spends time kind of just outside of their territory, watching the group and trying to figure out what they do on a daily basis and what might be the best route to go through there and be able to survive. The first thing that he notices is they have a distinct leader, an alpha male that he calls by the name of Lord. Now, however, watching him, he leads over the entire group with a very strong hand. Anytime anyone kind of challenges him, he quickly defeats them, sometimes fighting to the death. He's scarred all over his body, but never even gets close to losing a fight. Sometimes he kills the opponent that's coming after him. Sometimes he lets them go. The other one that he notices is a character that he calls Shadow. Now, this is a vir-mox that's much smaller, and he follows along behind Lord as much as possible. Anytime that he can, he's right behind Lord, which is why Tarkin gives him the name of Shadow. Now, he's also got a small group of 8 to 10 other vir-mox following behind him, kind of obeying and doing anything that he says. But anytime that they get too close or they start to annoy Lord, he quickly just turns around and runs them off. And they're ultimately no challenge to him at all. Not too long after, Tarkin slowly trying to creep up closer and closer and seeing, what may happen. In this time, Shadow sees Tarkin, and he realizes that he's been seen by Shadow, but Shadow never does anything. He doesn't try to run him off or do much, and so Tarkin keeps increasingly coming closer and closer. When he gets closer and closer, some of the vir-mox do try to run him off and keep him off of their area, not killing him or attacking him, just getting them off of their territory. But he notices that Shadow just kind of watches and sees what's going on and never really reacts or does anything himself. So Tarkin decides that it's the time, he's got to go. So first he begins to set up traps all around the area for his flea, that if he is able to get up there and he needs to flee down, he's got these holes with spikes set up all around there. So that if he's running away, possibly some of the vir-mox chasing him may crash in and fall and be injured, and that'll make it a little bit easier to get away. His plan is to go up very early in the morning. By going up very early in the morning, all of the vir-mox will still be asleep inside of their cave, so he can at least get to the top of the spike without having to worry about any attacks or anything, because it's kind of a treacherous trail up this rocky path to be able to get there. Once he gets there, he's going to kind of get himself up into a tree or ledge area where he's not able to be attacked, and it's very hard to be able to attack him because he's seen that Lord has trained them very well, and they're very well trained to be able to hunt and attack in a very organized way, and so he wants to be able to put himself at as much of an advantageous spot as possible. He's able to accomplish this, and once he's up at the top, the vir-mox start coming out, and they start growling and whooping and hollering, and quickly Lord comes out and realizes what's happened. Now, being the leader that he is, and kind of the alpha male, he knows that he's got to deal with the situation at hand. So he begins to send off their vir-mox to begin to attack and try to capture Tarkin. Now, during this, Tarkin notices that a few of the vir-mox are not following the exact orders or structure that Lord has always teach them. He also notices that Shadow's kind of standing off to the side, kind of watching and seeing what's going on and acting a little bit weird. When he realizes that those that are kind of going off and not obeying the exact orders Lord's giving them, he then realizes that those are the few that have been following Shadow this whole time. Because this is happening, Lord has to act and stand up and show that you can't act outside of his orders or else. So he begins to try to attack and punish those vir-mox that are going off. When he begins to do this, Shadow makes kind of a grunting noise, and as soon as he does that, the 8 or 10 other vir-mox then come and attack Lord all at once. This completely throws Lord off guard. As I said earlier, all of these creatures, any time that the Lords turn around towards them, they've all ran off. But with this plan clearly put together by Shadow, he's shocked, and before he's able to stop them, he's been severely hurt, and even though he's able to kill 3 or 4 of them, they ultimately overtake him and defeat him. When this happens, the vir-mox, being led by a group, being a group together and having a leader, they immediately stop trying to attack Tarkin, and they don't know what to do. While this is happening, Shadow moves up into the group to kind of take power over with the leaders. As he's moving up with the leaders, and there's some beginning to accept him as the leader and others still in mourning, Tarkin uses this advantage the same way Shadow used the advantage of the chaos going on to defeat Lord. Tarkin steps down with a vibra-lance and throws the vibra-lance and goes directly through Shadow, killing him. Now, the death of 2 of their leaders back to back so quickly just leaves them absolutely distraught, and they have no clue what to do, and they all are just basically collapsed on the ground, mourning and weeping and having no idea what's going to happen next to them. Because of this going on, Tarkin's able to just climb down, walk over to Shadow, take the lance from him, and as he walks back down the spike, when he walks down the spike, all the vir-mox just follow him down and then just disappear off into the wilderness. Darth Vader, very impressed, comments that so he's the last Tarkin ever to go through the testing, and that also that despite never being able to defeat them beforehand, Tarkin all by himself defeats the most powerful vir-mox clan all alone, and a group that has ultimately killed many members of the men in his family, he defeats all on his own. And this is where Vader begins to see what Emperor was talking about, that Tarkin is not just, he doesn't have the Force like Vader and the Emperor does. And that's kind of one of the things that Darth Vader's always focused on, being led up with the Jedi and then being a member following along with the Sith behind Emperor Palpatine. He views that as the most powerful strength and the key thing, but he sees now what Emperor Palpatine sees in Tarkin, and that's a brilliant military strategist, someone that can outthink and ultimately cause someone to kill themselves or wound themselves so that he can get the victory. And this is where Darth Vader ultimately gains that large respect, so that when you watch A New Hope and you see Darth Vader looking to Tarkin, and when Tarkin says, Vader, stop that, and he stops, this was a step that happened that led to that being the case. Anyways, guys, that's it for the Tarkin. I have 2 more videos that'll happen before the Phantom Menace. It'll be following what was going on with Yoda before the Phantom Menace and what was going on with Darth Maul before the Phantom Menace. Again, this is going to be a series following all the way until episode 9. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment down below. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you have any questions or anything else that's going on, any ideas for this series or any other possible series. But thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, please like. If you want to follow along with the series, please subscribe. I'll post my video that I did not too long ago right here about kind of my feelings on The Last Jedi. If you've got some strong opinions on The Last Jedi, there's a very long rant where I just rant for about... I actually ran it for about 3.5 hours, but I cut it down to 2.5 hours. And so if that interests you, there's that to click on. Tomorrow I'll be posting a video on Star Wars Rebels. I'll be doing all the Star Wars facts and Easter eggs on every single episode of Star Wars Rebels. And I'll try to accomplish that in the time before the final episode of season 4 or the series happens, to kind of just give little interesting nuggets and different facts, so that you can do well in trivia or just kind of have a little extra knowledge as you're watching these final few episodes. So one final thing down below is a link to my TeePublic page. You can pick up this t-shirt or a few other t-shirts that I have designed. But thanks again for watching, and never forget, you Nerf herders, I love you.